Hey everybody, we're going to start in about 3 minutes. Love to hear where you're from. Hey everybody, glad you're here. Just letting people join, got a couple minutes left. Let me know where you're from in the comments. Well, good evening everyone. Welcome to I'm calling this my winter, I was going to call it my winter COVID tour, but that sounded kind of weird. So this is my online winter tour. This is my second date. For those of you who don't know me, let me give you just a few seconds about myself and we'll get going. My name is Brett Ullman. I live in Ajax. It's great to see people from across the country. Ajax is about 45 minutes east of the city of Toronto in Ontario. My background is actually education. I was a trained high school phys ed chemistry biology teacher. Never did that. I spent my whole career teaching mostly Rotary science to grade 7s and 8s, but I also taught a few other behavioral classes. And I left teaching 15 years ago to do this. And this is actually my full-time job. I travel, I shouldn't say that anymore. Because of COVID, I do this. I sit in front of a computer and speak, and looking forward hopefully to speaking more in person coming up. When I left teaching, I did the Aero Leadership Program, and then I did a master's degree of evangelism and leadership at Wheaton Grad School in Chicago. Now I'm going to, and I don't know why my talk is way there. You're now seeing my talk going backwards. There we go. I'm going to do the rest of my presentation this way so that you can see what I'm doing, and you can also see me here as well. This is probably my favorite talk on that I do. I have a talk I do on parenting that I did last time called Parenting Navigating Everything, but Hope for the Walking Wounded has a little bit more meaning for me. This is my family. My daughter Zoe's in her first year at Western. She's actually at Western right now, which is a fascinating thing trying to deal with in her first year. My son Ben's a senior, grade 12, and my wife Dawn, she's a nurse. So this image has a lot of meaning for me because this image is how I felt a number of years ago. I'm an interesting case when you look at mental health in that I once did not struggle and then I do. I left teaching, as I said, did the Aero program, did my master's. During my master's, I began to have Well, I began to struggle just with doing too much. I was speaking now 275 speaking dates a year to pay for my master's. Now, speaking 275 speaking dates a year is crazy. That's just the way it is. It's just, it's too much to be doing. And then, so what I did is I just said to myself, I'll be okay. I'll just, I'll just work harder and I'll be fine. And I said, March 1st, 2012, if I could just reach to that, I would be okay. And so I made it to March 1st, 2012. And the moment I made it to March 1st, the moment I got to that date, I thought everything would be better, but it wasn't. I began to struggle and I began to have issues, and the issues began to grow. I remember being at one speaking event, and after I finished, I actually during it, I almost passed out. And you can't see by this, but I'm 6'6", and I didn't really know what to do. In the back of my head, I'm like, how do you gracefully pass out in front of people? And then I was at another date, and almost the same. I was doing a Catholic school tour of the Windsor area, and I found myself crying in my car. And it was one of those weird things of trying to figure out what's going on. And I canceled the tour and I went home. And then after that, I thought I was good. And I went out again. I remember doing the East Coast, and then I struggled. I remember speaking in, I think it was Camrose, Alberta. I was at a camp and I had my first panic attack. And like fight, flight, or freeze, I fled. Picture like, welcome, Brett Ullman. And I packed up and drove my car to the airport. Everything kind of finished, though. I was speaking at a camp called Lakeshore Pentecostal Camp, and I didn't even get to speak. It was the first day. I was out boating with some friends, went to McDonald's with our families. We had young kids. And coming out of the McDonald's, when you come out of a McDonald's, you have to walk through the drive-through to get to your car? Well, I thought I was being hit by a car. Everything just suddenly went slow. But I wasn't being hit by a car. I was falling into a parked car. And my equilibrium was just shot. And I called out for my wife, who grabbed my arm like a blind person and walked me to my car, drove me to the cottage. I didn't leave the cottage for a week. I didn't leave my house when we got home for 5 months, and I didn't work for an entire year. And there's irony in that it's 2021, and I still struggle with anxiety. I still have panic attacks. Depression's still not what it was, but it's still part of my life. This, to me, this image was the way that many people responded to me. People would come to me and say, they'd sit across from me on my couch, and they'd say, hey, Brett, have you tried? And these are the roads. Have you tried? The big one, have you tried Jesus? And I would say, what do you mean by that? They're like, Jesus. And I'm like, I know Jesus. What do you mean by have I tried Jesus? Like, it's a chocolate bar. I'm supposed to take a bite. And then they would leave. And then I would sit and wonder, have I not done something with my faith enough? And the next person would say, have you tried running? And the next would say, have you tried vitamin B, B12 or D or whatever else? And every time it was a million roads and a million directions. My wife and I had a chat many months in, and she challenged me to use this as a sabbatical. It's like a forced sabbatical, but she said, what would you do if you ever spoke again? And I said, I'm not. I can't leave my house. She said, what would you do if you ever did? And I said, I'd love to have a conversation trying to help people to have, what do you do if you're struggling with anxiety? How do we have an answer? Something that's practical and biblical. And those words are not oxymorons, right? Those words are things it must be. We must be able to connect our Sundays with our Mondays. And so I began to make this conversation, and this conversation's changed dramatically over all the months and all the years. So there are really two types of you here. You who are watching this live, or who will watch this on YouTube in the weeks and months to come, and you struggle. You're like, Brett, I get it. That's my journey. I struggle with any of these forms of mental illness. Maybe you're here and you're like, Brett, people I love struggle. I'm a pastor, I'm a leader, I'm a parent, I'm a teacher. My boyfriend, my girlfriend, my spouse, someone I love is struggling. And I would say all of us need to look at the idea of prevention. And now that's an interesting word to say. You can't prevent all mental health, but you'll see as we talk about some of the reasons we struggle, there's things that we can look at and things that we can talk about. So here's this evening. I plan to be an hour. I'm not going to rush through it. So if I go a little bit more, I'm not going to worry about that. And I know some of you might need to leave and you can come back. I'm leaving this on my YouTube channel afterwards. So depression and anxiety, first we'll look at what those are. 2, first steps, like what do you actually do to get help? Like I want to be uber practical. It's funny, you can't say the word uber practical anymore because it kind of means like taxi practical. Faith, how does faith play a role? Where's God in this journey? And then some thoughts. And then I say we're done, but I really hope and pray we're not done. I pray these are things that we take into our lives, into our families, and so on. And I really hope, and I say this with a lot of my talks now, that the simplicity of these conversations is kind of what are the strengths of tonight. So depression and anxiety. I have to be honest, I don't even know if we understand the basics of these words. It's no different than today. We use terms like mental health and mental illness as the same thing, and I do it even in this talk. But the truth is that there are people with mental illnesses, mood disorders, right? Depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, all these kinds of things. But you can have a mental illness and still have good mental health. And today, right now, we're talking a lot about mental health during a pandemic. And a lot of this is not, about those mental illnesses. It's just our mental health is not well. Our resiliency is not good. We're feeling blah. It's not depression. It might be, because depression and anxiety are on continuums. So think of anxiety. There's people who are fine with anxiety, and there's someone who has social anxiety or clinical anxiety, GAD, general anxiety disorder, which is what I've been diagnosed with. And then in the middle, there's a lot of things. There's my 2 kids right now who go to school and, they're wearing masks and there's all these things happening and they've lost grads and proms and there's some anxiety and a bit of probably depression with that. And there's anxiety. I was speaking, where was it? Leamington last year. And just before I got to the church, I got this emergency text. Anyone get this? And it said that there was an issue with the Pickering nuclear station. I live like 7 kilometers from it. My parents live like 3. And so talk about anxiety. But is that clinical anxiety? No. Is it still anxiety? Yes. Do we as parents right now worry about the future and the debt our country will have after COVID? Yeah. But how about depression? Clinical depression on one side, and the other side would be, people who are doing well. And in the middle, right now, there's most of us. We just kind of feel blah. Life is not what it should be. We're missing the people, those of us who go to church. We're missing our church families. Now, how did this look physiologically? Well, for me, dizziness has been one of my big things. And so I felt dizzy, heart palpitations, feeling like someone's sitting on my chest. I feel tingly all over, which might sound weird, but if you struggle with anxiety, you understand that. Feeling sick to my stomach, can't eat, can't think, can't read. I remember once reading a book and the words were kind of moving and I went, wow. So I went to see my optometrist and the person said, no, your eyes are fine. And they said, do you have anxiety? And I said, what? And they said, no, that's actually a sign of anxiety. And I've learned some days that's actually a sign that I'm actually anxious. But for me, the bane of my existence is not sleeping. I haven't had a full night's sleep since 2012. I'm up most sleep cycles most nights. Last night, I was very fortunate. I had a 5-hour chunk, and then I'm up probably the rest of the night. And I'd say to you, a lot of you are like, yes, I understand this. Now, I would say we need to watch language. In this article, they say people have taken to exaggerating their everyday experiences and punctuating sentences with terminology appropriate for a psychiatrist's office. They aren't nervous about an upcoming work presentation. They have bad anxiety. They aren't uncomfortable to go to a big party where they don't know anyone. They have social anxiety. And they don't get butterflies in their stomach. They have panic attacks. Here's the truth. We need to stop using language just like everything's about anxiety. Even today, every article you read in every newspaper and on the news is just talking about mental health, but it's such a broad, kind of generalized conversation we're having. Now, everyone deserves to be taken seriously. If you're a student and have to do a presentation online on Zoom tomorrow and you're a bit anxious, that's okay. But maybe we call it something else other than anxiety. Now, all the articles that you see that I in this presentation are all posted for you online. Now, if you're watching on the live, you will notice that I don't know which side I have to point to. One of the sides has all the comments of what you're saying, but if you go literally into the YouTube comments at the bottom, I've given you 4 things. One is my website. One is the rest of the dates on this tour. One is all the books in this talk on an Amazon link. And then one of them is to my new book, which I'll go over later. But you can find this article online. Now, one of the largest questions that people say to me and kind of propose is this. Technology is the issue, right? And people send me messages and articles that say like the iPhone is the issue. This is the biggest problem. Is this a problem? Yes. Is this the only problem? No. And so I would encourage you, especially to the Christians I'm speaking to, please don't be sky is falling people where we just send around messages about, get rid of these 5 apps and do these, like, the phone's got to go. Like, there's things we should talk about, but we just can't get rid of everything. So the infinite scroll, right? This, where we just scroll, like, this is an issue. It is. Studies have shown, and I forget the actual statistics, so don't quote me on this, but I think it says 1 hour of social media is fine, but 2 and 3 hours, people and students are the ones they're polling, show growing signs of depression. Like FOMO, the idea of fear of missing out. Now, we're in a different world right now with COVID, but usually you look on your phone and you see someone who's at a restaurant, at a concert or something, you wish you were there. Because you wish you were there, you're now not here, wherever you're at. The relentless pressure, we put so much pressure on students today and adults. We have brutal diets, we lack sleep, and I'm actually talking more to the adults here. Students go to bed late and then sleep in, but adults don't. We go to bed late and then have to get up for work. The idea of just not being enough, like how many of us just don't feel enough, students and adults. I have a hashtag Big Man Little World. This is my Big Man water mug. I quite like it. Dopamine is a huge one. Every time my Apple Watch, so the Leafs are playing tonight, every time there's a goal, I get a tap on my wrist. And every time that happens, I get a dopamine shot to the brain. Every time I look, and even in these comments, I see a comment or something here, right? These things are good. They give us dopamine hits. It's the love drug, something you'd get when you hug someone, get like a hug or a kiss. But here's the issue. What happens when a human being gets 500,000 dopamine hits? And I would say the students today, you are the petri dish, you are the experiment, and it's not looking good. The studies are showing incredible rates of anxiety and depression amongst high school students. Now, there's many reasons for that, but the phone is one. And ladies, their statistics are showing that it's worse for you. Now, over-parenting, you might say, what on earth? Why is that there? Parents, when we over-function, our kids under-function. When we overparent our kids for the entire life they're at home and then they head off like my daughter to Western, to a university somewhere, many students today are ill-prepared for the world that awaits for them because of us. If you did not watch my talk last week, Parenting, Navigating Everything, please go look at that. Our overparenting creates anxiety in kids because they haven't learned to be resilient. Resiliency, you think of it like a cheap plastic ball, you push it in and it pops back out. Not resilient. You push it and it just kind of stays in that way. Kids learn by falling and getting up. They learn by doing things. Other ones, predisposition, trauma. Someone has a serious trauma. This could be childhood, could be many things. Burnout, breakdown, isolation and loneliness, which is a huge issue right now. And I'm finding way too many of us are actually isolating at home. Sickness, long-term unwellness, substance abuse. The gray ones here are kind of the big ones. The truth is this. There are many kind of ways into mental health, mental illness struggles, and there are also many kind of ways out of that, and we'll walk through that. Back in May, Global News said 50% of Canadians say that they have worse mental health, and I would say that's wrong. I don't know anyone who really says, this has been good. Like, what a great 11 months. Like, no one has been saying this. Are there good things? Yes. I know many of us have talked about how rich family time has been and other things like that. And it's been, I don't like the term reset, but it's been a time to rethink our faith and family and money and all these things. But all of us would say this hasn't been a great season. This was a study done at U of A. Maclean's magazine did a study called The Broken Generation, Campus Crisis, The Broken Generation. So they pulled 1,600 students at University of Alberta, which is in the city of Edmonton. And look at the stats. 51% felt life was hopeless. 88% was overwhelmed by all they had to do. Now, here's the only one I don't care about. Like, when did you actually do this study? Was it Frosh Week? Like, was it exam time? Let's just move. That one, I don't care. Lonely, 62. Very sad, 66. What if you just said sad? If 2/3 are very sad, like this is an interest. You want a new ministry for the church wherever you live? Campus ministry. College, universities. 34%, over a third, feel so depressed it's difficult to function. Overwhelming anxiety, 52. Considered suicide, 7. Attempted 1. They made a premise, maybe it's just U of A, and then they polled people across the country, and they found the statistics rose just a little. From St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, British Columbia to as far north as we can go in Canada and wherever you're from in the world. This is where we sit today. It's your church and mine. It's your school and mine. It's your workplace and mine. Now, I would put forth that we give mental health a different set of rules than we do other things. And I believe it's unfair. I think it stigmatizes and it hurts people in our churches. So let's begin with the foundation that we all begin with a place that we can move towards healing. But look at the first comic. Someone's throwing up in a toilet and they say, have you tried, not having the flu? No one would ever say that to someone with the flu. But those of us with mental health, that's kind of a normal sentence. Like, have you just tried? Like, if we could think our way out of this, we would. No one wants to live with mental illness and mental health struggles. Second person's bleeding profusely. It's like you're not even trying. And the third, it looks weird. It's a person getting an insulin shot for diabetes. I don't think it's healthy you have to take medication every day just to feel normal. Don't you worry, it's changing you from who you really are. Again, no one would ever say that to someone with diabetes or cancer or taking other drugs or other things, but they do for people with mental health. So let's just address this. What about medicine? It's the number one question that people write me. Brett, I love Jesus. I'm a Christian. I was told I can't take medications. So asthma through sleeping pills. Here's what I just say with that. No one cares. Meaning, if you have allergies, you go and get like nasal spray, or you take like a Reactin or a Claritin every day. If you have cancer, and I have friends who have cancer, you do the surgeries and the chemo and the things that you need. But the moment we hit depression and anti-anxiety medications, everything changes. People's views change. It was two summers ago, I got diagnosed with Lyme disease. Some of you understand Lyme. It's kind of a crazy disease, but I was diagnosed, and they don't know if Lyme is the root of my issue, or as my doctor said, maybe you're just really unlucky, which was dark humor, but it was quite funny. And the truth is, I don't know. And I've been on a journey with Lyme, but here's what's interesting. I went on medications for Lyme, and I posted online, I'm going to be taking a broad range of antibiotics for Lyme disease. Please pray for me. Hundreds and hundreds of people wrote private messages saying, Brett, we're praying for you. Do you know how many wrote me and said you shouldn't take medicine for Lyme because you're a Christian? 0. Do you know how many medications I have? Do you know how many emails I have from people who told me when I was on medications for mental health that I shouldn't? Thousands. Now I speak and I travel, so I have lots of social media people, but thousands wrote me and said I shouldn't take medications. So here's what I would just say. I hope no one has to ever go on medications for mental health. I would rather that. And I have a video online, and I'll show you, there's an image of it near the end, and it talks about 6 things you should do before you ever go on meds. I do think we quickly head to meds, and I think there are other things we should try first, unless you are in crisis. If you are not able to work and you're not able to function, meds might be something you need right now. But what if you need meds? I say it's okay. It's okay. And it doesn't mean you're going to be on for a lifetime. And it's not an easy thing. And there's things that you can do to try to find the right meds. There's a website called Inogen. I'll drop it in the comments later. I forget. But it's one you can actually get a DNA test. And they tell you the meds you should try and ones you should never try. I think what's interesting with medications is I read a book once and it said it in the asterisks of talking about meds have been proven that they don't work. I'm like, when did that ever happen? Like, when did that get proven? And so I went to the asterisks and it just said, an article in the British Journal of Medicine. It's kind of like online with everything that's just shared around these days. We need to think through and critically walk through things. But I think we need to make sure that we're giving people good information on meds. Now, if you after my 2-minute conversation on meds say, Brett, I don't care, meds are always wrong. Here's my response to you. That's okay. I do think you're wrong, but that's okay. And here's why I say that. You and me can have differing opinions and still be brothers and sisters in Christ. It is a really, really important conversation to realize we can have differing opinions. But all I would say to you is this. If your opinion hurts other people and stigmatizes mental health, then keep the opinion to yourself. Because when I travel and speak, I can't tell you how many thousands and thousands of people have said to me this, the church has hurt me more than it's helped me. And that's not okay. And this is not a hard thing to change. These are easy, fixable conversations. And I'm going to walk through some conversations at the end of how we create good spaces. So what if you're here and you want to know if someone you know is struggling? You're boyfriend, girlfriend, loved one, parent, whatever. So what are some of the signs? So here's just a few. Number one, changes in eating or sleeping patterns. Now, here's the truth. Changes in eating, many of us are home a lot. Many of us are eating a lot more than we should, and we're not eating healthy. I'm glad I just saw Kelly says mid-workout. Great. Like, we need to be exercising and doing things. And sleeping patterns. A person wrote me last week, and they said, hey, my teenager is staying up till like 1 a.m. and sleeping until 11 in the morning on days there's no school. You know, they must have mental health issues. And I said, no, they're just probably a normal teenager. My son stays up at night. I mean, that's where he gets a lot of his connection with his friends on his PlayStation, and they play games and do things, and he goes to bed about 1:30. And he wakes up, his class starts at 10, he wakes up at 5 to 10, and he begins his class. And if there's no school, he'll sleep in the noon hour. And you know what? That's okay. Parents, grace and mercy to the students living in this world today. We have so much, like, just let them stay up late. That's their normal circadian rhythm. Like, I'm 49, at 10 o'clock tonight, I'll be like, oh, I'm getting tired. Like, it's okay, we're different. Social isolation. This one scares me because I'm seeing more and more students who tell me their parents are not letting them get out of the house. We might be in a lockdown. It depends where you're at. If you're in Ontario, we're in a lockdown. It does not mean you can't go outside. I walk every day outside. I get sunshine. I get to walk in forests and hike and go by the water. And I go with my wife or friends, and we distance, but you can go see people and stand on the front porch. Mood changes. Now, all these things could mean you're struggling. You know what it also could mean? You're normal. And we're in a tough, really rough season right now. Like, honestly, like, I don't know if anyone on this call would say that this hasn't been a moment during your week where you're just like, oh, I'm just so done. I said to my wife just before this live, I said, I really miss just going to a venue, a school, a church, a conference, and just seeing faces as opposed to staring into a webcam, even though I'm so glad to be here. I miss that. I miss people. Not able to function? You're in trouble here, right? This means we're struggling. And this is where you make sure you're checking in on your friends and family. Apathy, loss of desire to do things. And again, part of this is not mental illness. Part of this could just be the season we're in. Now, the problem is that poor mental health that we're having now could turn into mental illness or other physical issues. Substance abuse, alcohol, drugs. It's interesting how many times I've spoken in the church, and the number of, especially like young moms who told me they've struggled with alcohol or drugs with young babies in the house just because the sleep deprivation and other things. Pornography, the biggest two talks during COVID, mental health and parenting. Third, pornography. I mean, the stats, pornography, I mean, I've seen stats of 200%, 300% have grown because people are just at home, overeating, undereating. Number 7, feeling guilty, worthless, self-deprecating, these belittling, undervaluing ourselves comments. Number 8's my scariest though. No signs. Meaning if we're on Zoom and I could see all your faces, I can't go, okay, the top row has mental health, like, that's not how it works. And sometimes I love when someone says to me they have are struggling, because then I can talk about it. But there's people who don't ever mention it. The number of, especially men my age, who walk up to me after a talk and they wait till everyone's gone and they're like, you struggle with anxiety? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I think I do. If you're on this call and you're like, I wonder if I struggle. This is the question I often get. Do you think this is? And all I would say is this. If you're asking a question, do you think it is? Like, do you think you have anxiety? You probably do. If you think you have depression, you probably do. No one ever just wonders out of the blue, am I anxious? Unless you feel the pressure in your chest. Unless the sleep and the other things. No one says, I wonder if I'm depressed. Unless the darkness, right? Unless you just feel that apathy and the other things. So, what do you do? What do you do if this is you? And what do you do if this is your loved ones? So, I think this is chaos. And what I want you to do is to create 3 roads. And I'm not going to walk through a huge how I got to here, but I believe that we need to look at people. One of my psychologists once said that to find healing, we have to divide up the indivisible. You have to think about that for a second. It's an interesting line. I think that we are physical, emotional, and spiritual beings. And so we must look at the body. And I think a family doctor is a good beginning, but your issue might be physical, so go see a doctor. Your issue might be emotional, psychological. Go see a registered counselor. Now, you're waiting for me to say it might be spiritual. But here's what I say. It's incredibly incredibly uncommon that your answer to your mental illness is spiritually rooted. But here's what God says. You're going to go through tough times, but I'll be with you in these journeys, right? And so I think our faith, God being with us in these journeys, this is a foundation. Our worldview, our Christian worldview affects our values. Our values affect our actions. And so I say building into your faith is great, and we should do it in these seasons. But I don't say that this is the answer to our mental health. Now, body, mind, and soul is not like three things. It's more like this kind of Venn diagram. And everything affects everything. Have you ever had a really bad cold or flu or COVID or whatever, right? If your body is affected, you're not like writing great exams or papers or doing great things, and you're not having the best devotional morning of your life. It's all affected. And I encourage you every day to do things for the body, the mind, and the soul. When COVID hit, when I say it hit, remember in March when I know in Ontario, our schools were pushed for 2 weeks past the March break. We had dinner as a family that night, and we said something's happening and we don't understand what it is. But every day, I'm going to encourage us as a family to do something for the body, the mind, and the soul. And at dinner, we would kind of chat about how that went for us. And I would encourage you to do something like that as well. I'm at a talk, had to be 10 months or more ago, and someone asked me this in the Q&A after. Brett, do Christians have less struggles with mental health? Great question. Really interesting. And then there's the discussion of mental health and mental illness. And I said, no. I said, I don't think Christians have less cases of cancer. I don't think Christians have, I think those are kind of normal things in life. And then I went home and I was wrong. This is not a Christian magazine. It's Psychology Today. And they say it's because of our religiosity. Now, if you have been in the church for a while, you know that this term is usually a negative term. Now, this isn't you don't know Jesus and you suddenly meet Jesus and then you don't struggle. What this is that the things that we do because we're Christians are good protective factors. We, again, taking COVID out of the picture, we go to church, we go to small group, we go to groups like Celebrate Recovery and Freedom Sessions and Grief Sessions or Grief Care. We go to places where there's people and we look people in the eye and we're together. And these things protect us. So I want you to understand this it's a simple thing, but really important. I'm an and person. I'm not an or person. I believe in the body and the mind and the soul. It might be exercise and counseling and faith, right? It might be all of those things. Now, each of you believes one of these things is more important than the other. It's natural because of who you are. I'm a kinesiology major. I look at the body so quickly. And the next slide, we're going to start looking at body, mind, and soul. But some of you might be, I'm a clinical counselor, I'm a psychologist, I'm a social worker. And you're like, the mind is it. And then I hear a pastor going, Jesus, like it's Jesus. And I'm like, yes, like it is all of these things. But here's the problem. We don't know what people need. Because again, I can't just assess you. And I am not a psychotherapist. I am not a social worker. I'm not a psychologist. And so we need to stop assessing people if we don't know, if we're not skilled and trained, and we help them get assessed properly. So here's my journey. My journey will not be your journey. Might, doesn't have to be. So the first thing I did is I got a physical done by my doctor. I had blood work done. I'm currently in my third or fourth year at a functional integrative medicine clinic, and I believe this is the future of medicine. It's doctors and naturopaths and all kinds of other kind of modalities all put together under one roof. We do blood work quite a lot. Sleep specialist. If you see the YouTube button, it means that I actually have a YouTube video on this. Here's an interesting story. So I went to my sleep clinic. If you've never been, they put electrodes all over your body and they say good night and you fall asleep in a room. And in the morning, I went to see the doctor and I said, hey, can you fix me? And he said, no. And I did this. I looked down and he kind of said, no, look at me. He says, this is good. You don't want sleep issues. You don't want sleep apnea or these other things. He says, tick it off your box that this was not my issue and continue your journey. And it was one of those moments that was really life-changing for me in this because it was like, yeah, that's a great point. Tick. Friend of mine, youth pastor in Alberta. I won't say what church or anything else. His church was not a church that I would call a safe place for people with mental health. His church said to him, your issue is spiritual, we will pray for you. By the way, yes, we pray for people. But his church would not even tell him to go to a doctor. 6 months in, this guy wrote me like on the edge. He said, Brett, I'm not surviving. And I said, just go to a sleep clinic, please. Sleep was the issue we chatted about a lot. So we went. And in the morning, he said to the doctor, "Can you fix me?" And the doctor said, "You have the worst sleep apnea I've ever seen in my career." And they gave him one of those, I call them Darth Vader machines, BiPAP, CPAP machines. And he was better in, honestly, he wrote me and said, 1 day. Now, I'm glad he went into the church and his pastor, lead pastor, sent him home like he had to get better. But if you haven't slept a lot for months and you have a rich, deep sleep, it's healing. Medicine. I'm not currently on medicine. If I need to go back one day, I will. And I say I'm not, even though I have a bottle of Ativan that always stays with me, especially when I travel. Ativan is just something that brings me down a bit. It goes under my tongue if I'm nervous or anxious in the moment. CAT scan, MRI. I had an MRI because I was sent to a neurologist. Because of my dizziness, they just wanted to make sure it wasn't something in my brain. It wasn't. I've read books, and I'm talking probably in the 200 range, 220 of mental health. I read never ending. I would encourage you to read, and I have an Amazon store with the best books divided into category. My mental health ones are there. My naturopath, I've had a nutritionist. Referrals, you might need an allergist. Here's the truth. Your issue might be because of your unsustainable life. And many of us lead unsustainable, unhealthy lifestyles. We eat garbage, we don't sleep, we never exercise, and then we go, I wonder why I'm not feeling good. And so I would just say to you, everyone should exercise every day. I don't care what it is. Now, right now I walk outside. I think some people are from Saskatchewan. If it's minus 35 to 50, maybe you don't walk outside. Coldest I've ever experienced was going to Briarcrest once. I think it was minus 52 or something. Here's my point. Don't argue what you can't do. Tell me what you can do. And find something. Walking, going to a gym, doing a class, my wife and I do bands right now because our gym is closed. And I would say, if you struggle with mental health in any way, shape, and form, this is a non-negotiable. Number 2 is sleep more. I'm doing still what's called sleep training. I go up every night at 10 o'clock. I read fiction. I do not read ministry and theology books. I read fiction books. I'm reading a junior high series right now called The Uglies and the Pretties. But I read fiction and I go to bed by 10:30 every night. This is just training my body for sleep. And I would say eat better. I'm not saying you have to go keto, vegan, or something else. I'm just saying this. Maybe burger, fries, and a Coke becomes a burger with a side salad and a club soda. I have a smoothie in the morning that has more goodness in it than anything else. Do this. Look at how you can get better at this. While you're doing this, go see a registered counselor, psychologist, someone. Gain some perspective. Get a framework for when you're on the bottom. I always say I sound like Drake, but when you're on the bottom and you want to get better, you don't just get better. It's a process. It's a journey. And for some of you who are really struggling right now, one step in your journey is all we're talking about. Maybe just even turning from being unwell to trying to get better. It's something. Pace of life. No one had to tell me to not speak 275 speaking dates a year. Support for my emotions, care for my family, anxiety management, referrals. I had to go to a psychiatrist at certain times. And I would just say have fun. If you're in high school here, most of you still have fun. And I know this season's not fun, but as we get older, sometimes we don't have fun. We're busy, we're working. And I would encourage you, do this. This is important conversation here, looking and walking through your life. And we build our faith. And this is what the church does so well. These are spiritual disciplines, right? Pray, read, fast, study, give. I have a YouTube video on my favorite books on spiritual disciplines, and find one. There's the big names are like your Richard Foster and Dallas Willard, but there's a book by Nathan Foster, Richard Foster's son, called The Making of an Ordinary Saint. Quite good. Ruth Haley Barton. There's some female writers in that. Great stuff. And I would just say with this, one of the kind of more important conversations is, God doesn't change in our journey. We might struggle. We might think God is far from us, but God doesn't change in these conversations. I think one of the things we seem to forget is that because it's an emotional conversation, our emotions are kind of deadened. I had a quote I wanted to read to you. I have 2 laptops running right here. It's really just this. Our circumstances will never alter the character of God. That's what I wanted to say. And what I encourage you to say in this season is just like, Jesus, help me to learn something in this season. This is about building your faith again. I'm not saying this is going to fix your situation, but maybe you can have better mental health, even if you're struggling with mental illness. Now, I added the spoons theory in. today for you, and then I realized that this isn't a presentation, so it covered over other things. When I'm in a non-faith-based environment, body, mind, and soul can't be body, mind, and our faith. It becomes soul and spirit. Have you ever gone for a walk and you say, oh, it's really good for the soul? These are the things that I can give in the mainstream public, which are also good for us. The ones that are covered: well-being, purpose, volunteering, gratitude, we're going to talk about in a minute, relationships. Here's the spoons analogy. Spoons is, I don't know where my pens are. If I had a whole handful of pens, it's like spoons, right? You only have so many a day. And if it says here, it says if you only had 12 spoons, how would you use them? Take away 1 spoon if you didn't sleep well, forgot to take your meds or skipped a meal, take 4 spoons away if you have a cold. Here's the point. You only have so much to give. So give your spoons to things that matter. Go to work, go to school, spend time with family, do those things. Like if I'm unwell, I wasn't out shooting pool with friends or, watching a basketball game at someone's house. I was putting my time into those things that mattered the most. Mindfulness will come back to reflection, family, and friends. These things are so, so important. And you don't know which in the body and the mind and the soul are those things that will help. And I just encourage you to do all roads at once. So how does your faith connect? Now, this is a quote that I don't know if I want to begin with or put here, but I put here. And here's one of the biggest issues in our church world. Herein lies one of the most pervasive misunderstanding regarding mental illness, that God spares this kind of pain and suffering from those with deep and abiding faith. It goes on to say, far too many pastors, church leaders, and attendees within our Christian subculture demonstrate an insufficient understanding of the nature of mental illness and struggle to respond to those affected in a manner that demonstrates compassion and concern that promotes spiritual growth. This is one of my top books on mental health, especially for those of you who are pastors and leaders. Stephen Grekvich, but it is a great, great book. So I didn't have a lot of people speaking into my life on mental health. And one person wrote me 36 purposes of God in our suffering. And I wrote him back and said, are you telling me God did this to me? And he said, oh, Brett, I don't know. I Googled mental health and Jesus, and this is what popped up. I had this dichotomy, this tension between that's the Bible. And below that is the book by Edward Munch, The Scream. And it was one of those books or those images that I really connected with, because that's kind of how I felt. And then I found a book, and again, we're doing everything quick tonight, and I want to give you, I think we want less theological debate and more what do I do. But this book really helped me because it said to me, here's why you suffer. And I believe here's why you've ever suffered or will suffer. Number 1, Genesis 3. We're caught up in a fallen world and we're deeply affected by it. I've heard this at a few funerals, and it was really moving. One of my board members was 41 when he died of a heart attack. Why? It was last winter in Toronto that we had one of those windstorms that comes through, and they showed a picture of a man walking, and this entertainment sign, shows movies and food, fell and killed him. He's like a father of 7 kids, and it's so random. But we live in a fallen world, and we're deeply affected by it. Number 2, we live with the effects of others' sins. By the way, the first one is we live in the now, but the not yet. My professor once used that at Wheaton, and Matt Wilkinson used that term in his youth ministry book, but the now and the not yet. Number 2, we live with the effects of others' sins. One of my best friends growing up was a guy named Warren Parker, and he was killed by a drunk driver. And his wife and his family and us, we all live with this forever, that someone made a really stupid decision and it affects all of us. Now, number 4 and number 5 are ones that we don't do well. Meaning, I think too quickly we head to the conversation that there's a spiritual realm. But Ephesians 6:12 talks about it. And there are churches that everything is spiritual. And there's churches that don't ever talk about this. And I think a really good book to begin would be the book by Neil Anderson called The Bondage Breaker. Good beginning conversation. And God's discipline and discipleship. And this is one that I still have to walk through because there's verses in the Bible that I don't understand and I don't like. It's good for me to be afflicted so that I might know your decrees. God tests his people and his prophets to know what's in their hearts. There's these verses that I'm like, But here's the truth. If you said to me, Brett, which of these are you? I would say now, and this is my response. I would say, I don't know. And I say gracefully, I don't care. Because my life's been changed forever by my mental health, but it's also changed many other things. Like I could have never sat and had this conversation with you on mental health 9 years ago. I had empathy. A pastor said to me about a year ago, he said, Brett, every other talk you speak with empathy, with this one you speak with authority. And I'm still kind of trying to walk through that. So the verse that we all get given is this, Romans 8:28. And the point is that people give it to you saying it will be good. And I think we need to challenge whether this is a right, proper, definition of what the Bible actually says. I don't think Paul actually says life will be good. I mean, I think if I came back, if we did another live a year from now and I said, hey, who has had really tough things happen? Some of you would say things that happen. My kid got cancer. My friend died of a heart attack. There was a car accident. Did these people only need to read their Bible more or pray more or be more faithful and they wouldn't have had this happen? No. That is absolutely spiritual abuse, and that kind of stuff is not okay to say. How about looking at people in the scriptures? John the Baptist, like people who literally walked with Jesus. John the Baptist was beheaded. Jesus was murdered. The disciples, other than one, were murdered and martyred. We learn from scripture and from Christian history. Someone once yelled out to me, what about Job? Job came back. And I said, what about Job's family? Had about probably 12 people say to me, what about Job? And every time I've said, what about Job's family? Not one has understood what I meant by that. And I have to explain to them in the book of Job, the verse that talked about, and the wind came and the house fell and Job's family died. They died. Job came back, but his family didn't. Is God's kingdom moving towards its end in Revelation? Yes. Is it good? Yes. Is life always going to be good? No. Remembering God's ultimate good and our daily little grind good are not always going to be the same. The best translation of this verse given to me by a systematic theology professor was, he says this, it's not will be good, it's working along with for the good. Meaning, no matter what's ever happened to you, no matter how it happened, no matter why it happened, God is working with you and he's for you to bring it up for the good. That I get. And for me, I think that's my life now. I can now have this conversation and it's changed the trajectory of my life as I look at how I can do mental health better. I'm actually looking at going back to school to becoming an actual psychotherapist because this conversation now is something closer to my heart and probably to a lot of you. So as we continue to walk through this, what did I need? And I can give you 2 slides now, and you can come back and pause these later, but these are things I'm going to encourage you to never say again. They were said to me so much, and they're still said to me, but I think they all hurt people. And let me just walk through them. Number 1, everything happens for a reason. I don't think this is true, and I don't believe it's biblical. I actually believe if you take this to where, like, the nth degree of everything happens for a reason, it's called determinism. And determinism is actually Islamic. It's actually not Christianity. Let's walk this through. You head to someone's house. Today, you Skype a friend or FaceTime someone who's struggling, and you're like, everything happens for a reason. And they're like, what reason? And you're like, I don't know. God does. And then you leave. And then what do you think happens when you leave? They sit and they go, I wonder what I haven't done. And I wonder what the reason is, right? This is not helpful. Number 2, God must have something amazing planned. By the way, he might. But don't tell someone on their darkest day, hey, guess who's doing this to you? Are you still reading your Bible is an ongoing thread that I hear from people. And I don't get it. Like, it's kind of like if I stop reading my Bible, God punishes me for that, which is not what the scriptures say at all. Now, statistics say 90% of us don't read the Bible Sunday to Sunday. So another conversation. We're actually going to address this 2 weeks from now. Words from God. I didn't grow up. I grew up Baptist. I married a Pentecostal, which is not supposed to happen. I know that. And now I've been attending a church for 15 years used to be C4, then Crothers Community Church, other way around. And now it's Sanctus. But I didn't grow up with people having kind of God told me things. And of the 200 people who've said this to me, only one's ever made sense. This lady once said to me, you have lead paint poisoning from all your third world travels. And I'm like, I speak in Hampton Inns most of my life, and I speak predominantly in Canada, maybe a handful of dates in the US. God won't give you more than you can handle is not in the Bible. You can't just take a verse that says God won't tempt you more than you can handle and change it to something else. That's where we head towards cult-like things. If you need any help, let me know. Here's an easy one. Don't ask if like, hey, if you want to go for a burger, let me know. Or hey, if you want a coffee, let me know. Just do it. I once read in a book, I forget which book it was. I think it was Troubled Mind by Amy Simpson, but it talked about how mental health is a non-casserole illness. Casserole for younger people is just like lasagna. When it was 2 summers ago, I fell off my bike. I hit mud. I literally broke 8 bones, ribs, all down my left side. And do you know how many people offered to bring me meals? All kinds. All kinds. I had mental health issues, was home for 11 months. Do you know how many people brought me meals? Next to none. Very few people. Like a very small handful. It's interesting, right? But don't just say, do you want to go for coffee? Say, I want to go for coffee with you. Which day works, right? Like sometimes we don't know what we need and sometimes you don't know how to help. So just take a bit of leadership. Is there sin in your life? I still get this. And my response is always, yeah, lots. And then they don't know what to say. Have you tried praying? Of course. Satan the demonic, you will be okay. I wouldn't say you can be okay because we don't know if you'll be okay. I just would say these things aren't helpful. Let's take away unnecessary barriers. Hear what you can say. Say, how are you today? Today, the one word changes everything. When you say to me, if I see you at a conference or a church and they're like, hey, Brad, how are you? Are you just giving me a pleasantry? Hey, good, you? Are you asking how my weekend was? I once said to a guy a couple of years ago, I said, hey, do you know that I've had a breakdown and I've had some struggles? The guy's like, no, I had no idea. Like, so how are you today? Say I'm praying for you and then actually do it. Like, do you have a system where if you say you're going to pray for someone, I use an app called Evernote and I have a folder called prayer requests. And if you said pray for me, I would write your name in with your text and I would text you and say, hey, how are you? What's an update? Say something, say anything. Do you know how many people in my life never address mental health? Do you know how many close friends of mine are not close friends of mine anymore? You know how many people just don't speak to me ever? And I would just say this. Let me tell you this story. I'm at a church, where was I? Saskatchewan or Alberta, somewhere out that way. And I'm sitting with the youth pastor and the worship leader comes by and I know her and I said, hey, or she was a children's pastor. I said, hey, how's your breast cancer? And she bursts out crying. And the youth pastor punches me. And then she yells at him and says something like, and she says like, he's the only person to have asked, because he said, oh, you can't ask that. And she said, he's the only person to have asked me about that in 2 years. How? How on earth do we claim to be the church and no one in your church has asked you for 2 years how your breast cancer is? Now, here's the truth. Many of us want to ask, but we're scared. And let me just free you. You can ask anyone anytime. Ask anyone. It's okay to say, hey, I know you had some anxiety. How's it going? Hey, it's been 3 months since your husband's death. How you doing? Tears are okay. You're showing that you care. It doesn't mean you're making them cry or anything. Now, for those of us who struggle with mental health, we also have to take some responsibility here to say this. If we're not in a place that we can answer, just say this. Thank you so much for your care, for your concern. I'm not in a place I can answer today, but I'll let you know when I can. Give them a hug. Maybe not during COVID, but in normal life. Sit with them. Listen to the journey. Ask, how is your struggle going? Talk about something else. I want to talk about sports and life and other things. I don't want every day to be about my life. Now, you're looking at shawarma and Big Mac. Here's just the truth. My favorite food in my life is a chicken shawarma. And the darkest day I ever had, remembering suicide is wanting your pain to end so bad you're willing to end your life. I never crossed that line, but I lived on it. And one day, my wife she's a nurse, she's at work, my kids are at school. I'm sitting on the family room floor. I wasn't doing good. And I got a call from one of my board members. We're a charity, and his wife said, hey, I'm getting something like, do you want? And then she changed and said, I'm getting you shawarma. I'll be there in a while. And there's a place near me, if you're ever in Ajax, there's a place called Pita Delights. They're Christians from Nazareth, and they make the best. If Baba Ganoush hummus and tabbouleh kind of fills your soul like mine. She just brought me a bag, handed it to me, and I took a bite. And I remember saying in all my darkness, there's something about food. You know what I miss most from my Baptist roots? Potluck Wednesdays. Because I had a chance to be with people. It'd be me and my friend's father and a buddy and a sister. Like, we'd all get a chance to talk and hang out. Food is something. Even now, even now, food is something. I remember hearing about a church. It was the first week they went back. And so everyone came in, this was in the US, and they didn't have all the pews as normal. They had chairs. And so they had sets of 5 kind of 6 feet apart, and there's another set of 5, another set of 5. And so you would come in with your family or whoever, a couple of young adults, and then me and my family, and you would chat. And the pastor said, iced coffees are on the side. He had my heart with that. Iced coffee is my favorite thing in the world. So iced coffees, donuts, grab something, and you had 10 minutes to chat. At 10 minutes, this side picked up their chairs and moved to the next group, like musical chairs. 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Pastor said, church is done, sermon's online, worship's online. I'll see you next week. And they said people cried because they just wanted to be in front of each other. Like food, go tomorrow and take your best friend a pizza from Pizza Hut. Like if you know what people like, there's something about food. And yeah, you can go have a nice coffee on someone's porch. We're allowed to do that right now. I've made 20 videos for you to use in your church or for you to just use personally. These are just daily little things that you should look at. They're 2 minutes long or less. And it's looking at how can we have good mental health during a COVID season. Exercise, sleep, and diet, we've already looked at. Using your space. For students or adults working from home, do not use the same place every day. My wife is a nurse. She's in home care management. She works from home. She seems to do different angles on the kitchen table every day. Students, don't just sit in your bed. Go downstairs, upstairs, family room. I know a person who lives in an 800 square foot condo in Toronto, and she's studying university. And she wrote the other day, studying, and she showed herself, it was 5 pictures. One was like her sitting on the kitchen floor. One was her on her bed. One was her on her couch. Just use your space. Connection. We just done this. Get any connection you can. Less news. If you like news, I do. I watch news once a day. If it's the morning, I don't do it at night. Now, today was different. I wanted to see some of the inauguration in the US, so I watched it a few more times, but stop just scrolling the news and Facebook all the time. Breathe. This is an interesting one. I want you to breathe. There's an app called Calm, and another one called Headspace. There's a few other Christian ones, Dwell and others, but I really am a big fan of Calm. When you are anxious and you breathe calmly, your body has to respond. So, like inhale, hold, exhale, you've heard of those things. And so 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. If you're really bad, 30 minutes, and you know what, if you fall asleep, just set an alarm. These things will help you over time. Counseling. Counseling is good. I've actually seen numerous counselors over the past 8 years. I've even said to my kids as they've been growing up, anytime you want to see a counselor, you can. It's okay. We all have seasons of anxiousness about life or school or relationships or other things. And from a parent's perspective, I need other adults, other people speaking into my kids' lives. And so counseling's okay. And if you're on this call and you're a church leader, make sure that you have counselors, men and women, who you have those emails or those contacts somewhere online. I think we should all have schedules, even though there's not much happening. I would encourage you to read more. Like, find a really good book. Even if you read 5 pages a day, you'll read 3 books a year sometimes. Watch a TED Talk. Family check-in is just where we need to make sure we're checking in with each other. If you have young kids, this is really important. There's actually a chart you can get. Just Google like kids emoji check-in. It's emoji check-ins. And especially young boys, angry, sad, happy, right? It's quite easy. 2 more slides. Put more positive in your life. Watch more of The Office as opposed to watching murder shows. Limit work. Those of us who are adults, we can now work morning, noon, and night. Be careful. Grace and mercy. Grace and mercy to our teachers. Grace and mercy to the students going to school. Grace and mercy to the people working at Costco and every other grocery store. Grace and mercy to the people driving. Grace and mercy to yourself. Like, that's the hard one. The things we miss jar. If you have this is my mug. If you have a jar, like the gratitude jar, you put things you're thankful for in, and then you pull them out. Things we miss jar is where you put into the jar things like, I wish I could go to school. I wish I could go to church. It'd be great tonight if we had a mental health night at my church. But when we can do it, pull those things out and celebrate that we can actually do it. Listen to music. Do today well. I'll challenge you to go and do on your own. Family dinners. Please eat together and not around the TV. There's something protective about sitting as a family for everyone, and puzzles and games. Some thoughts, some resources, and we're done. Please advocate for each other. argue for the cause, support and defend. Sometimes when those of us who are unwell are really unwell, we don't know what we can do, and you can stand in that gap in body, mind, and soul. Hey, do you need a ride to the doctor? Can I go with you? You have a counseling appointment you're going to cancel? What if I went with you? There's things that you can do. Now, I put this on my own wall, and I say it to you gracefully, but stop being a victim. Stop making this your identity, and stop wallowing in misery. Like, you are not just the depressed person. You're not just the anxious person. You're not just the person with an eating disorder. You are so much more than that. Even if you don't feel it, you are. Dr. Dan Siegel wrote, "We need to help children understand that the clouds of their emotions can and will roll on by." Change children to teens, young adults, or adults. Today might be a dark day. It doesn't mean that every other day is going to be the exact same. I like this one. If one door doesn't work, choose another. If one medication doesn't work, choose another. If one counselor doesn't work, choose another. If anything you're doing isn't working, do something different. Right? Do something. Like, you've heard insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. This is a fight. So fight. I see so much apathy in the church world and so much just sitting and waiting. Bruce Cockburn, a musician, if you're young, you might not know. Bruce Cockburn once sang, "To kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight." And I encourage you to kick and fight these battles. Keep walking through them. Winston Churchill once said, "Never, never, never give up." And you can make your church, you can make your school, your whatever, a relevant, accepting place for those of us who struggle with mental health by doing one thing, by talking about it. This is my favorite talk to do on a Sunday morning. I call it Care Sunday, where I'm just part of your church, just saying, like, this is a place that is a safe and welcoming place for you to come and struggle. Design policies of prevention and care. Now, I have a YouTube video on, is your church a safe space for people with mental health? Now, I say safe space, and I don't like that term because it's become kind of this term we hear in universities, and people are always triggered by things, but people are triggered by things, and some places might not be safe, and especially for mental health. So here's what I would say to you. Number one, talk about it from the pulpit. It starts from the top down. And I think every church should have at least one Sunday a year dealing with mental health. And you can talk about faith and God being with you and all these things, but address it from the front so that everyone sitting goes, we're all on the same page. Number two, check the language we use. When I'm in a musical worship service and the leader says, everyone rise, I now can't worship anymore. Because if I'm dizzy in a church, and so many churches are on it, mine's on a slant, if I have to hold on to the pew in front of me for dear life, I'm not worshiping God. Why do we have an unnecessary barrier for something so simple? How about you just say this? If you can rise, if you want to sit. How about all the single moms who've been up all night, or dads? How about people who work the night shift who are exhausted, people who have a bad hip, right? Let's just realize our words mean things to everyone in the audience. Number three, physical ropes. Don't put out ropes. We do ropes to get everyone in the middle. And who's that for? It's so that we look, I don't know, is it a look or for the cameras? I'm at a church, we're doing a mental health talk, and I walk in and the guy says, "Hey Brett, is it okay we have the ropes out?" And I said, "No." As I say no, there's a lady walking by with her coat. She stops and she said, "Are there ropes or they're not?" And I looked at the guy and he says, "Your choice, Brett." And I'm like, "No, please take them out." She goes, "Okay, I'll stay then." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I struggle with really severe anxiety and I sit in the corner and my seat's roped off, so I was leaving." How unnecessary is it that we rope off a building, seats, and that person has to leave? Those of us who struggle with mental health like our places. We like where we sit, and that's okay. And if that makes you feel more comfortable and secure, then that's okay. Turn the music down a little, and here's what I mean, like, my church is a loud church. Many are. Or is the interesting statement. I'm at a church out in British Columbia, and they actually gave you earplugs. And when you came in, it says, if the music's too loud, here's earplugs. And here's the one I liked even better. I forget where I was. I think it was in the East Coast. And they said this: "We know we have loud music. If you if for whatever reason that's too much for you, outside there is a plasma TV with speakers on low and a bunch of couches. Please feel free to go. And when you're done, please feel free to come in. You're not disturbing us. Like, talk about permission. I just loved it. Resource your congregation. Here are the counselors we use. Here are the different things that you can get involved in. Educate your staff. Mental health first aid. Assist. Now, I think everyone should do it. I just did the Assist. They have a new one for faith people, leaders, quite good. And there's Assist, Safe, and Suicide kind of conversation. You can host groups, and if your church doesn't host them, then promote the other churches that do. Freedom sessions, celebrate recovery, grief care, raising funds because things like counseling are expensive. And I was at another church that just rocked me. I left my talk and I didn't realize they had a book table set up, and it had mental health and they had all these things on, and there were pamphlets on the ground of all the different types of mental health struggles and all the local groups in all the churches. And they said, oh, we do this once a month. And I almost cried. I'm like, this is where I want to be. Like, you are my people. Like a church that just says, we know you struggle, but here's how we're going to help you. And I would say do a walkthrough, because each church is unique. We're talking about mental health right now. What about people who have different physical disabilities or other things? And I just think it's important to kind of look at how we can get rid of unnecessary barriers. Some resources. This is the portal that the Canadian government made called Wellness Together. I don't know why it's not wellnesstogether.ca, but it's the ca.portal.gs. Tons of really good info. My website is just my name. It's actually just brettallman.com. If you go to brettallman.com, you will see this. And if you click on blog, all the things that are down the side there, including mental health, will be there. And I post the most on mental health and parenting. Now, I'm not a normal blogger. I guess I'm more of a vlogger, but I'm actually more of a curator. And so what I do is I read a lot of stuff, and then the best content I find, I'm like, here you go. Even just yesterday, I wrote a quote, like just simple things. These are some of the YouTube videos, and you're on YouTube right now. But here's the truth. Many people on YouTube don't follow people. So if you subscribe to my channel, you will actually see the stuff that I do. But I have a lot of videos on mental health. There's the 10 ways to make your church a safe space. At the bottom is walking. I walked every day for 6 months, and I don't think I can encourage you more how that was life-changing for me. I said during our talk on medicine, so these are 6 thoughts if you need to be on meds and 6 things to do before taking meds. And I think a lot of our struggles with exercise and even our faith is habits. And so I have my top habits books for you. And I would encourage you to read one called Atomic Habits. I think this will help us in our mental health, our faith, and others. Every talk that I do is filmed and live on YouTube. You can go and find them. The Walking Wounded is this, but it's an older version, and you can go look at it again if you like. I've written 5 books. My first 2 are on media and faith, which is next week's talk. The Wounding Embrace I wrote with Adam Clark, who is a pastor at People's Church in Toronto, and Dr. Mary Lynn. She's a psychologist. This was written before my breakdown. So it's good information, but it's not like body, mind, and soul. And Reset, if you go to my website and scroll down, you will see this. If you sign up for my newsletter, it's a free digital download. If you don't want to sign up for my newsletter, just search it on my website. You'll find it. This is my breakdown put in book form. And that sounds weird, but someone asked me to write it out, so I did. And then I had 18 friends and family write their journeys. Kerry Newhoff wrote his. I was very fortunate to get him, and a bunch of other friends and family wrote their journeys. My new book is actually, and is a massive beast. It is 226,000 words. It's 5 to 6 books in one. Now, why am I promoting a parenting book? The mental health chapter is the largest chapter by far. And other than the first 6 chapters, every other conversation in this book that I wrote is actually written to both parents or someone who struggles, meaning you could actually, as a parent, give this to your teenager or read it yourself. And so it is a beast of a book, but the goal was one resource for parents. I have 2 videos, my top 14 books on mental health and my top 7 books on loneliness. And these are my top 2 books. I do have this one physically. The Ripple Effect, Sleep, Eat, Move, Think. Like, it is, bar none, probably one of the best things. And the Anxiety and Phobia workbook is I don't know where my copy is, but it is a massive, massive workbook on this. Just last week, I was I was able to put up, I don't like the term, but it's an Amazon influencer page, but I have on this every category I speak on and every book inside that. So if you're looking for books, if you click on that site, and it's in the bottom of every one of my YouTube videos as well, you'll find every book. So go to mental health, they're all there. And it is Amazon affiliate. So if you buy anything, it does help us out. And thank you so much for that. 2 slides and we're done. My counselor once said to me, Brett, put this beside your bed, great courage with great care. It sounds so simple, but it's pretty profound. Some of you tomorrow will get up, and I know what it's like. You will have a really bad night. Whether it's bad sleep, you wake up with a panic attack, whatever you're struggling with makes you feel ill or unwell. Great courage. Get up. Do what you need to. If you have to chunk your day, meaning swing your feet over the bed, go to the shower, put on some clothes, if you need to chunk your day, do it, but go do what you need to do tomorrow. Many of us, it's work, it's school, it's family responsibilities, and then great care. And here's the problem. Many of us don't know what great care means. What is it that fills you up? Devotional time, going for a walk, Skyping, FaceTiming grandmother, hanging out with people you love, playing a video game, whatever it is. Maybe it's all those things. I would encourage you to find those things that work for you and do them a lot right now. So the goal today was simple. It was to take you from a place, that kind of picture of all those roads in a million directions, and take you to a place of body and mind and soul. Now, for many of you here today, all this conversation, all this journey is really overwhelming. And I would just say, I understand, but I'm glad you're here. And the goal is to push you forward on this conversation of hope and healing and restoration. John Maxwell, one of my favorite leadership gurus, he talks a lot about when you get challenged by someone, choose one thing, just one thing. And so I would just say to you, what is the one thing I said to you tonight? The one thing that you're like, I can do that. I can walk better. I'm going to start doing this, whatever it might be. And I would just say, start there and make those things habits in your life, and then just kind of keep moving forward. I want to give you a quick slide here. This is the rest of my tour. This was my parenting one. This was today. 2 Wednesdays from now is my media, faith, culture. Then I'm doing one called Men Navigating Everything. Women are welcome to listen to this. It's actually made for men, though. How do we be better fathers and husbands and boyfriends? Talk on pornography, and it does say parents or students. There's nothing graphic about that. And then the last Wednesday, March 17th, is my talk on dating. This has been a lot tonight. I thank you for the few comments you guys have written, and I will check later into the actual YouTube comments for any questions you have. And I also just say you're more than welcome to find me online. Thank you so much for being willing to have a conversation on mental health. And I would just encourage you to go do better in the body and the mind and the soul. I'll talk to you soon.